webinar on our data management toolset and particularly master file merging. If you've got any questions, please ask them through the chat module, and we'll pick those up largely at the end, if that's all right, just because we have half an hour. So, as I said, my name is Christopher Young. I lead the risk and new business intake team here at Pinnacle, and with me is Bo Lynch, who heads our 3E practice in the US. And as I hope you all know, in this webinar, we're going to be covering FDs, addresses, and payors. Just before we do that, what I thought I would do is just give you a very quick sort of overview about who Pinnacle are. Hopefully, many of you will know us, but for those of you that don't, we're an implementation consultancy. We've got about 85 or so people throughout the world who are focused entirely on working in the legal sector. We advise about 60% of the users in both the AmLaw 100 and the UK top 100. And we have, I guess, two really important partnerships. The first is with Thomson Reuters as a result of today's event. And then we also have a really strong partnership with Intap, and as well as I manage Microsoft LexisNexis. Within our business, we've got three sort of core parts to it. The first is, as I say, we're an implementation consultancy. We've got a finance systems team who many of you will know, and that's really where our where our Thomson Reuters relationship is focused. We've got a risk and new business intake practice, which is what I lead, which is largely orientated around Intap toolset. We cover the whole of the Intap toolset. And then we have a team of data engineers who largely are migrating people from enterprise to 3E, but we do a bunch of clever things with data. And then we also have project services to the change management sort of people within that consultancy practice. There are other things we do in there. If you want to find out more about those, then our website's the best place. But we also have, importantly, a small software development capability where we're developing tools to help firms get more out of the applications they bought. And there are three that I'm really going to talk about. The first is Monitor, which is effectively allows firms to know that the systems are, and the data within their systems particularly, is as it should be. Master file merge, which is all about today's conversation, which is about how do you just make sure that your master files are as clean and tidy as they can be. And sort of allied to that is address cleaner. We've got some, one of the things that's a real challenge for our data engineers migrating from enterprise to 3 is around addresses. We find users put in appalling data around addresses. We've got some thinking and some tools that you'll be able to see over the next few sessions that we're going to run in this series, how you can make address management and address cleansing really quite straightforward. And then the third part of our business is around managed services. So we not only run our business on 3E and Intap Time, and we use Intap Flow, but we manage these systems for some of our clients. That gives us a unique insight into some of the challenges, and that then has fed into the software development. So Monitor has been developed or started off life as part of our, as a tool for our managed services team to help them manage some of our key accounts and the data and things going on in their system. That's a really quick overview as to who we are and what we are. You can find out more on our website or get in touch with us towards the end. So I'm going to move on now to today's conversation, and particularly some of the data issues that we are finding in firms' 3E systems. And there are two that I really want to pick up today. The first is entities and their duplication. I first started getting involved in this really because from a risk point of view, firms are gathering lots of AML, money laundering, and performing effectively regulatory tasks multiple times when doing client due diligence. But we're also finding that firms are finding it hard to manage credit risk against clients because they've got these duplicated entities. We're also seeing firms struggling to apply rates and other client service things consistently across their clients because those different entities are set up in different ways, and consequently inconsistencies creep in, which then cause upset with clients, and that then rolls on into greater lockup, AR days are increased, and of course ultimately there's a data management cost to having these duplicated entities. A little bit later on we're going to just show you how you can solve some of this and how some of it you can do today and how we can help accelerate some of these. Fundamentally, firms are making poor decisions or poorer decisions because they don't understand the value of their clients, their client groups quite as well as they might. And they're also they've got inconsistent profiling data about those clients. Addresses, we have loads of problems with addresses because there's such enormous volumes, and the data is of poor quality, inconsistent, duplicated. It's really hard to fix. So that's what we're going to really focus on today, these two key elements, and we'll also touch on payors. So to move quickly on to entities, and just to make sure we all understand what I mean by an entity, the structure of 3E and many of the connected systems is that in order for a client to exist or a vendor to exist, there must be an entity record. In most firms, we would say that it's almost one of the least capitalized objects within the databases that people they don't use, and it has huge value if you get it right, and I'm going to try and explain why. So in my diagram here, you can see my very simple 3 boxes. We've got Barclays PLC. It exists 3 times as an entity, once as a vendor, once as a client, and once as a payer. In reality, what should happen is that they should be one. Hanging off the client one, we've got a bunch of matters. And from an AML and risk point of view, firms would end up performing risk checks against those 3 entities. So I'm going to take it on a level and just, in this situation with illustration, I've got 3 clients. They are the same legal entity. I've got matters under each. And what we really want, and what we're really saying, is that you've probably arrived in this place for a number of reasons, but ultimately, you really want those 3 entities to become one and to be merged together, and the payer to be merged into it. If you do that, you can get some really powerful insights into what's going on in your business. And on that note, so I've sort of talked through the theory, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Bo, who is going to show us this working in 3E. So let me just show you it working in 3E.
Thanks, Christopher. Just waiting to get presenter, I think. Presenter rights. Perfect. Okay, so now I think everybody can see my screen. So in our instance of 3E here, I just tried to mock up the exact same scenario that Christopher was describing, where we have separate clients, separate entities. So I pulled up the entities that we have for Barclays, and you can see their entity use. Here I have one that's both a client and a payer for 114321. Here's a payee and vendor. This one is just a payer by itself, so a third-party payer. This one's a client and a payer. And then this is a client and a payer also. So you can see that it's, kind of disjointed a little bit. If you're looking at things from an entity perspective, you have a one-to-one relationship between entity and vendor, entity and client, all those things. And then we have the same thing if you look from a client perspective. These are the three clients that we were talking about. And you can see that they each have their own entity index. And I could show you the matters too, but I think it's probably most interesting to take a look at it from a metric perspective. So let's look at like a client management. I ran this metric, and it shows you, so I don't know, probably most people have not really used entity in their metrics. They don't necessarily come up by default, but they're super easy to add on. So all I had to do, originally I just had client up here with no entity, and I could just say add more, go to the client subset, the entity, click on it, select it, and then it ended up over here, which I've already done that. So then that just makes it available to you as one of the dimensions up above, and you can drag it down and then see things by entity. So you can see now that it's not really all that interesting. We have 1.8 million pounds billed for this, that's one. Well, it's 4 entities today, but you can see that it's obviously like the same client. So we have 1.8 million, but you can also see that they're each below a $500,000. So it wouldn't be too hard for this to get lost a little bit farther down if we were looking at every client in your system. They might not jump to the top immediately. Similarly, like if I look at an AR aging metric, there we go. Matter aged AR, same kind of thing. So if I'm looking at it from a client perspective, and I bring in the entity in the same way, we can also bring in like the matter number. So this is what I think everyone's or most people's 3E instance looks like today, because they're not really aggregating things up by the entity. And that's great for billing purposes, but you can see that like maybe collections people are more interested in seeing things at an entity level because they'd really like to make one phone call to the company at a time. Marketing people, certainly in business development, would like to see kind of, what are our top clients? And if we're talking about top clients, rather than thinking about it from a billing level, it'd be great to think of it from an entity level. So, so now I'm going to ask Karen if she can, in the background, run our entity merge. I gave her a file. It's really pretty simple. So I gave her a file that just says that this is we call them victors and victims. So, so there's one entity that's going to survive the merge, and the other 3 are going to get merged into that one entity. So it's really just a 2-column file. There's some options that you can choose, like you can choose to merge sites or merge addresses or things like that, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. But for this purpose, I just wanted her to just merge the entities together so that we could see them. So I'm not exactly sure how long that will take. I think it just takes a minute. Let me just test it and see if it's finished now. So I'll search for Barclays. It would help if I could spell it correctly. Okay, excellent. So we used to have 5 here. I only selected the top 4. This was a different example of like a joint venture kind of thing. But so here you can see that she's already merged them. And now when I look at entity use, I can see that I still have all my different client numbers. I still have an individual individual vendor. This is the third-party payer. Here's the payee. They're all linked to this one entity through entity merge. We've got all the different sites. They're all joined up under this common entity now, so that's really great. And so if I go into my metrics and I try rerunning them, so let's see, I was looking at client management. I called my metric run bow test. So I'll just rerun that. Run number 4. And then I'm also going to just go ahead and do the matter aged AR while I'm in here as well. So I'll run that. Also run number 4. Excellent. So now if I come back and try to look at this, see the results in the presentation, you can see that these 3 that we merged together now exist within one entity. So, if you're looking at this from a billing perspective, you still probably care about it from a client level of detail. But say you're doing collections, or say you're doing marketing or something, you get rid of the client level, and now you've got an aggregated line that shows you by entity what your fees are for that sole entity of Barclays. So I think that's super interesting and probably useful to some parts of your firms. Like, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of choice. This is the way for one user to save their metric presentation just at the entity level, but then billing people might still prefer to see it at the client level. I can show you the same thing from a matter aged AR perspective too. Okay, so here we've also got it split out among the different clients and then aggregated at the entity level. But if I get rid of the client, then I can see it holistically at the entity level. And then the same way, we can still drag down our matter number, see things at a detailed level. We can do the totaling. So everything still behaves the same way as it did before. But the nice thing is that we can actually represent, the real relationships that you have within your firms. So I think that's all that I wanted to share as far as the demo goes. So I guess I'll pass this back over to Christopher. There we go, Christopher.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Bo. Jumped. So hopefully that sort of shows you the art of the possible, and essentially what we believe moving to an entity rather than client-focused model helps you with is understanding, for example, in a private client business, the value of an individual. So we haven't really shown you this, but essentially if you take me and my wife Pollyanna, we might.
Christopher, I don't think you're sharing. Sorry to interrupt.
Am I not? No. Thank you. Am I sharing now?
There you go.
Fantastic. So for those of you that are working in private client businesses, one of the really powerful things of this is that individuals who have multiple relationships with your firm, so either on their own or as a couple or as owner-managers of businesses, those different relationships can be represented and tied to a single entity. And that also applies to insurance type businesses where you've got claim adjusters, you've got insurance companies, you have a wealth of people who are collected collectively in that relationship. And by linking to deduplicated entities, you can see those multiple revenue streams. And then if you run a referral-based business, so a business where third parties are helping you win work, you can track where that business is coming from using those entities. Even though they're not clients, they're linked to the matters and can be, and you can pull those metrics through. So there are massive advantages of understanding and cleaning up for entities. We have really skated through entities, and there's a lot more we can show and could say, but we've got 10 minutes to go, and so the next thing I wanted to move on to was addresses. Now, again, due to time, we're not going to necessarily show you a demo of merging addresses, but we have the ability to merge sites, and what happens is that we repoint any use of a site to one common address and site. It works in a very similar way to entity. We don't delete the old sites. We just link everything to one place. And we have a bunch of tools which allow us to standardize and normalize addresses and move things around and along the address lines, and to make sure that the data is as it should be. If that's of interest, then and it's part of this tool set, then and do get in touch. The one that we're working on at the moment, and will be in a sort of future release, is sort of payors. Payer merging is, again, we're hearing from clients, really important because it's making credit control really difficult. And so we're looking at ways of trying to effectively consolidate payors into one record. So that's the art of the possible. And I guess what I was going to do now is to just move on to, so how does it actually work? And the way it works is relatively straightforward. We don't put any customizations into 3E. This is sort of outside of 3E, and it effectively uses our data conversion thinking and applies that onto the 3E database. And what we then do, either you or we, as Bo said sort of earlier, identify duplicates, and we can do that through comparing names, or we have a strong relationship with Bureau van Dijk, but can use Dun & Bradstreet and use those to identify the victors and the victims, and we have our address cleaning technology, which will effectively again allow us to identify duplicate addresses. And we produce this list of victors and victims. If clients approve those, whether that's the finance team or whether it's the risk team and compliance, whoever it needs to be, and then the toolset tells 3E to merge and affects that merge in 3E. And then our advice to firms is that you need to make this a business as usual process. Firms will and users will create duplicates, and it just needs to be a really simple process. And we've got a number of firms who are running that simple process. You can put it in today before you can build that process sort of almost before you put in 3E if you're not quite there yet. And there are sort of 3 or 4 firms who are at various stages of putting in such a process. And these are 4. Holman Fenwick, they have got 3E and they've got Intap Open, and they're doing an integrated sort of process across both systems. Marant had loads of users who were using 3E, and they were just creating duplicates because they had lots of duplicates in their system. When users sort of needed to create a new matter, They were sort of, well, which one of these ones should I choose? And they didn't know which was the right one. So the temptation was to create a new one because that wouldn't be wrong. And as a result, they had lots of duplicates. And it's particularly challenging in a private client type of situation. Waitmans have got 3, and Mattersphere, and the merging is integrated across both of those in terms of entities and addresses. One of these firms had 65,000 duplicate entities that they've merged away, and there's another firm who they're merging 6,000 entities a week at the moment, which is pretty remarkable. The sort of question is, or there's a sort of question around, well, how do you manage this process? And you can manage it in Intact Flow if you've got that, or any other sort of workflow tool set. So this is a screenshot of a really simple form where someone has chosen the victor, the red Barclays, and they've chosen a victim, and they've been shown some data which will allow someone to approve those that merge. And we, in one firm, are pre-populating a form with the here are the suggestions, and then it goes off for approval, or sometimes it's approved offline, and then the duplicates, as I say, disappear. So to try and sum up in the last 4 minutes, the sort of benefits, there are big benefits for finance. Reporting gets clearer and understanding total exposures. Billing should become less of a battle. Client money, regulatory things should become easier because you only need to do it once. From a risk point of view, there are big benefits. From a front office point of view, on things such as new business intake forms, there's a shorter list of clients. We would ordinarily show only entities as to choose from. Marketing, you'll end up with better data, a better understanding of your client base, and more focused activity. And there's a reduced data management cost. It all sounds pretty daunting. We have data engineers who can help. We have data stewards who can actually do the work. So finding duplicates with data engineers, data stewards helping with the actual QAing of the proposed merges, making sure that the decisions are made. We have a business intelligence team who do BI reporting, and they're very keen on helping with this sort of thing. And then we've got this address cleaner and monitor tool that we will share with you in one of our next sessions. Which leads me on to the next session. We've got a date on the 19th of November where we will show you the monitor tool, which is all about how you keep things as they should be, and knowing that your systems are in sync, that the discrepancies are being kept to a minimum. And then in 2020, we're hoping to show you some stuff around some of the making quality into the addresses that you've got, and the processes around addresses, and helping you move from enterprise to 3E and other systems. And then final one around just how do you improve, how do you stop automated systems moving rubbish around. So we're at 4:29. If you're interested in any more detail or a specific conversation, some of you will know Bo. I'm based in the UK, and in continental Europe, we've got Mikhail. Drop any of us an email or pick up the phone. And on that note, at 4:29, are there any questions?
I don't see any in the chat window. The only thing that I would add is just that I think Cyril is going to make this recording, this WebEx recording, available to everybody that was participating. I think it's password protected, but I think he can get you that kind of information. So if you missed something that was in this presentation, especially like our phone numbers, our email addresses, you should be able to get them that way. And then the second thing is, we did try to keep this brief as Christopher mentioned, but there's a lot more detail that we could go into. So if you'd like a more in-depth demo or something like that, we'd be happy to do that. Okay, thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you all very much.